A lot of younger people that have recently been in seminary or undergrad and met you for the first time did so in a process of theological education where the most defining event for them is 9/11. And I happened when I was a sophomore in college, and I remember going to class that day where we didn't do anything, and I ran into my theology professor, and I said, "This changes everything." And he said, "The Holocaust did the same thing. Y'all should read Moltmann," because he figured out what's it like to let that experience shape real Christian theology in response to a world that's different because of an event. And a lot of us haven't had a chance to be a minister where 9/11 isn't a shaping part of the life of American Christianity. We're still engaged in wars that came out of it. A lot of people in our congregation still have anxiety and fear that are driven by it. What advice can you give us in thinking through the gospel and articulating it in a way that we're in a culture that's still defined by a real framing experience?
Well, I was very much moved by Elie Wiesel's book, Night, his experiences in the concentration camp of Auschwitz, when he tells the episode that 3 prisoners were hanged and 2 died with a cry for freedom. And then there was hanging a boy who was tortured because he was so light and couldn't die. And then he heard a voice behind him, "Where is God? Where is God?" And a voice answered in himself. He said, "Where is God? He is hanging there on the gallows." This is, for me, a key to understand the crucified God, the God who shares the wounds and the pains of the victims of violence and terrorism, etc. So, and therefore I said, well, God was not absent in Auschwitz. God suffered between those who suffered in Auschwitz. And this would be my recommendation to the victims of 9/11 and their families. God is the fellow sufferer between them. What the terrorists did, they did against God. And God is suffering under it. And this gives me at least some consolation. So God is not punishing New York homosexuals by 9/11, as somebody said at that time. I think this God who uses terrorists to punish his own people is a monster. Is for me not a God. But I think we should turn around our thinking of the omnipotence of God. God is not in control of everything. God is carrying and bearing everything. This is his real power. His almighty power was suffered by Pharaoh's army when they were destroyed. But there are at least 3 or 4 phrases. You carried us like a mother is carrying her child in her arms. You are bearing us through the desert like a father is bearing his only son. And we are carried on eagle's wings. So again in the prophet Isaiah, you have the phrase, I will carry you until you become old. And so this patience of God, this carrying everything, gives his world time and a chance and a future. And this is, for me, the omnipotence of God, His all patience.
Was there a moment? So divine impassibility is this idea that you argue was inherited by the early church from Hellenistic philosophy, that the nous, the mind of God, would not change because that would be in contradiction to the very character of God. And so they then develop a very strict dual nature of Christ doctrine in order to protect the impassible nous, this mind, this this Hellenistic mind of God.
Yeah.
Is there a epiphany moment in your theological career when you kind of think that's not God? Because you go on then to write, an impassible God is not a God but a demon. Only a suffering God is really God, which is that's a strong statement. And
yes, I know.
Against
something. Sometimes I cannot avoid strong statements.
Yeah, good. I think we appreciate that.
Well, this comes from Aristotle, Metaphysics, Book 12, where he says the divine is apathetic. And this is a criticism over against the many God stories in the Greek mythology, who are angry and loving and cheating and drinking, and there's Zeus and all the other gods to say no, the divine nature is apathetic in itself. But the God of Israel is not apathetic. He is full of pathos, of love, and of anger. And anger is a form of expression of wounded love for his people. So I think I learned this first from Abraham Heschel in his dissertation he still had written in Germany in the 30s, and which was published in the first form in German, and then again in his book on the prophets, where he speaks about the pathos of God and the sympathy of God, and makes a lot out of it. Because if God is an apathetic God, then his image on earth must be apathetic too. But for us, modern people, and I think for all the people on earth, apathy is an illness. If a child becomes apathetic, you go to the doctor. So apathy is a sign of death, I believe. Perhaps there was another signal for me when I first came to England after I came out of prison. It was in the beginning of the 60s, and the New Left in England had a book out with the title Out of Apathy. And I find this very moving. That's a kind of a battle cry. Get out of apathy. Get involved. Get engaged. It's better to be defeated than not to begin a fight. Get out of apathy. And these two things that I brought together and spoke about the passibility of God. I think the first idea I got in a conference in Scotland when I ran into a book about the impassibility of God and the passibility of God by John Mosley, a book written in 1926, where he listed up the whole debate in Britain about the passibility or the impassibility of God. A theological debate which completely bypassed German theology. There was no one in Germany who ever heard about it. And this was a 60-year-long debate in the Anglican Church between those who started from the Eucharist and then came to Golgotha and then spoke about a cross in the heart of God from the beginning on. The lamb was slaughtered from the beginning. And those who started from philosophical theology and from Aristotle. I picked this then up and brought it again into a public discussion.
And how was it received when you started?
It became, in the best sense of the word, controversial. I like to be controversial.